You are welcome to the African Leadership Conversation, where we bring you relevant information about leadership on the continent. Our core mandate here is to bring you the answers to the hows, the whys, the whats, and the whens of leadership in Africa. There's a place for discourse in our society amid the cacophony of voices and the fervor of demonstration. This interplay of protest and discourse is integral to the functioning of a healthy democracy, as it allows for the exchange of ideas, the exploration of different perspectives, and the pursuit of solutions to the pressing issues of our time. In this context, we'll be looking at the topic, Leadership Uprising, the protests, the drivers, and the outcomes. I'm happy to be joined by two gentlemen today, Kofi and then Sylvester. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you very much, Dee, for having us here.
It's been a while, Kofi. We are so glad to have you here.
I am happy to be back home, it's such a blessing to enjoy watching again when your wife did not make it. Not that her food is not good, but the one that the woman sells by the roadside is really nice.
Yeah, we must not forget
the one by
Gobe.
the gutter, actually.
By the gutter.
Not just the roadside, the one by the gutter.
By the gutter.
And we must not forget Gobe.
I had Gobe for lunch today. I thought it was amazing.
Yeah.
I know my wife would have wanted to eat Gobe as well, but it's not going to happen.
Anyway, amidst the joy of having had a sumptuous meal, Kofi is the co-founder of the Grace Life Leadership Center, and he's also a senior manager at Microsoft. And then Sylvester is the president of the education sector here at the Grace Life Leadership Center. He's also a consultant for Africa-China Affairs. Well, should I say you are welcome again?
Yes.
Thank you again.
Thank you
again. Yeah.
So every year on 16 June, we celebrate the Day of the Africa Child, and one may wonder, why? So on this day, some 47 years ago, some 20,000 black school children went on a protest against the use of Afrikaans as a medium of education in school. This was during the apartheid time, and it's reported that over 176 children lost their lives. This particular uprising, which is known as the Soweto Uprising, is viewed to have been important in helping to lead the legislative dismantling of the apartheid in the early 90s. And it's also led to the adoption of a new constitution in 1993. Now, let's just take a few years down. Let's say 3 years ago. We all heard about the End SARS movement, which occurred in Nigeria. With this protest, of course, just like the Soweto Uprising, it claimed some life, unfortunately. But this protest had partial success. Partial success in the sense that it led to some form of sensitization, though. But then there was also a promise of a wider police reform in Nigeria. So for my guests here, would want to know, why protest? Is it just a means of democracy, or is it even needed at all?
You want me to,
Yes.
to answer that
Yes,
first? Okay.
like-
Do you want to speak in Chinese? You
Well-
can start with that.
I'm not sure, but people are ready for that. But even before I continue, I just realized something very interesting.
Tell
I realized
me.
that we are wearing the same color of shirts. Kofi is wearing pink. I'm wearing pink here too. Yeah.
I did not get the notice. I should have worn pink.
Yeah, it looks like it's very coincidental.
I know.
I learned this is the pink month.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
for breast cancer awareness. So,
yes, exactly.
well, since it was a coincidence and nothing planned, I think that we should just use this platform to wish all ladies and guys. I guess I had males also experience that, so I hope that
Exactly.
everyone will stay safe out there. Just take care of yourselves, and we wish the world to become less and less cancer free. Yeah.
Yes.
Having said that, I think these are all issues that people can actually protest about. Yeah, if people want to end something. So for me, protests are a democratic arrangement, because I'm not sure other countries have similar kind of protest like we've seen in our part of the world, Ghana, Nigeria. of course, at least I know of China. Until recently, it was during the COVID that I saw my first, ever since I started watching China and China's rise, that was my first time seeing people around Shanghai protesting against the government for strict COVID restrictions and all of that.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is that protest, or the opportunity to protest, is not a privilege that all citizens across the world enjoy.
Yeah.
And so people call it a democratic kind of opportunity or privilege for citizens of different countries. So why protest? I think for me it is a way for people to express their grievances in a collective way, based on issues for which they're protesting, different issues.
Right.
So people are protesting for maybe increment in salaries, right? We could have large-scale protest, that is national protest, or even small-scale, that is maybe campus and all of that. So I believe that these people go on the streets just to fight for something that they believe that is the way to do it, to draw the attention of the people. Yeah. Probably they've explored all options, or they believe that other options will not work, but maybe going on the streets and shouting out loud for whoever is responsible to kind of address the issues. Yeah. So I think maybe that is why protests are there. First of all, democratic arrangement for people who want to express their grievances. And we've seen that all over the world.
It's like, I mean, I do agree with you. I think that like democracy allows for like protest, right? In certain jurisdictions, it's not probably a way that you can take. You might probably be faced with a lot of opposition from the government, but I think protest is something that is part of the democratic, way or culture that anybody would want to sort of develop for any country that is pursuing democracy. I mean, I can think of a few reasons why. I think one of the fundamental things about human beings is that we want to be heard. There's this idea that when like you want to be seen, you want to be heard, you want your opinions to be taken into account. And I think that protesting is one of the ways that people speak up, right? If you will. Sometimes the speak up might not necessarily even be using their voice. You can have people with placards that says words that they would rather want to say. So I think it's one of the reasons why people do protest, because we want our voices to be heard. It's part of the normal way of being a human being. And I think to the point that you made early on, one of the reasons, like another reason why people protest is just they want to bring forth their grievances to people that they believe have both the responsibility and the authority to be able to address those grievances. And so it's also a way of making an appeal, although depending on how it goes, it might not always feel like an appeal. Sometimes it feels like a criticism, it feels like a reproach. But I think fundamentally we can assume that one is for people to hear, to get their voices heard, and number two is just to make an appeal. Can I bring my sentiments and my grievances and what I wish could be done to the one who I believe has the authority and the responsibility to get it done. So if you ask me, that's my thought as well, just to buttress Sly's point early on.
So gentlemen, my next question will be, are these protests effective at all? I mean, I spoke about the NSAS protest, which is reported to have had just partial success, and it's been 3 years now. And then we look at other protests that have been held in the past, like ones done by the likes of Martin Luther King. So I want to find out, who are these people? Who are the people behind these protests usually? What are their motives? And usually, do they get the desired results? The kind of protests we see these days, do they yield results?
Well, maybe I will just share my views first. So it's a very interesting question, right? Because anytime I see people on the street, people, publicly expressing their grievances, the question I ask is, are they going to find the results they are looking for? Right. At the end of the day, what are they even looking for? Right? Because normally when you see people protesting, you see different things on different placards. You read different things. Recently someone even went for a protest and was looking for a husband.
I think she later changed it in the middle of the protest.
Yes. So
that she's found one?
No. Like initially she was part of the group protesting for with them. Then
Okay.
Right.
she later swapped the board and said she was looking for a husband.
Yeah. So you ask yourself, what's the motive? Why do people go on the streets, right? And you realize that people have different intentions.
Right.
Of course, mostly they would structure it in a way that it's a collective concern.
Yeah.
So Ghanaians are all talking about high inflation. So definitely you see people with placards that say that reduce inflation. Ghanaians are complaining about unemployment.
Yeah.
You definitely see young people unemployed, either employed or unemployed, fighting for the government. Normally it's targeted to the government to do something better, right? Yeah. So I think there are different motives for protest, but fundamentally people just capitalize on the general concerns of the people to go out on the streets, right? And mostly these are people who are passionate about whatever is being protested against, right? And they feel like they have a role to play. And this is how they could do that. In fact, we have in the past heard that President Akufo-Addo was once, one of the leading, protest leaders of the Kumi Preko, protest and all of that, right? Yeah. So these are people who believe that they could champion a particular cause through that protest channel. Yeah. So let the authorities know what is in their hearts, in a very loud manner, right? So if you ask who are those behind that and what are their motives, I believe that normally we have people who believe that they can champion a particular cause, so they rally others behind them. And normally they fight for issues that they think affect them or affect the wider generation, wider population. Yeah, so I think it's not straightforward. We have people protesting for different things, and whether or not they achieve this, their objectives is another topic for discussion. Yeah. Because how do you even measure whether? Because like I said earlier, people protest for different. You see placards with different concerns. Yeah. So at the end of the day, how do you measure whether they have results for the action they took? Yeah. It's very difficult, right? Mm-hmm. Except in very different special scenarios where, like the Temamoto Way incident, I think I was telling someone earlier, there were potholes and people were crying out for that. So we could see that the government, not only potholes, but there was a toll booth that citizens thought was causing accidents.
This is Ghana, right?
Yes, in Ghana, right? Okay. Citizens thought it was causing accidents, so there was a need to pull it down. And I realized that in some few days the government actually responded. Okay. But generally it is very hard to measure success of protests. Yeah. I don't know what you think, Kofi.
Yeah, I think you are right. Like when you talk about the different motives, I think one of the things that Dinah had alluded to early on was like making reference to Dr. Martin Luther King. Yes. I think there's been a dispensation where in the past protests have worked, like this time where they were looking like in the US just trying to get black people to be included and everything. I think one thing that I wonder though in our current dispensation and like recent history, if protests have the same impact and effect that they used to have in those days back where, because previously I would assume that if you were a leader, it could be political leader, it could be whatever, and you have people protesting against your policies, your decision making, it probably wasn't commonplace. And so it was also an indication, probably, right, that's the word, the emphasis is an indication of a loss of confidence in your leadership. And so people did not want to see people protesting. So if you're a leader, you don't want to have people on the street with placards. And so those days maybe was an effective tool, to get your voices heard and to get attention from the people who could actually get you the result that you were looking for. However, you might probably be right when you say that in the past 20, 30 years, protesting is not a big deal, if you will. Several times you will hear nurses going on strike and protesting, teachers going on strike and protesting. So maybe our leaders have developed a certain sense of non-response, or I don't know what better English word to use, but they are no longer responsive to protest, because probably the impact of protest some 50, 60 years ago, it's not the same as it is right now. So I think that's one thing I just wanted to point out, that probably, the results that protests delivered in the times of Dr. Martin Luther King and all the other protesters that delivered result, maybe protest as a tool is losing its efficacy over time. So it might be something that, as the conversation goes on, we can dive deeper into it. But specifically in terms of, whether a protest has been successful, has delivered a result, I think it's a very interesting dynamic to think about, which boils down to what is the objective of the protest. You gave an example which I like is when people protested with the potholes and the Motorway in Ghana, it seemed to have brought about a swift response, right? But we don't know about, like, let's say the protest in Nigeria. Did it deliver the result in the way that they would have hoped? I don't know the answer. I don't know if anybody knows, but chances are that maybe not. Maybe it did deliver the answer to a certain extent, but not all the way. So it really boils down to whatever we are doing, whatever we are protesting about, even if we are using other channels of getting our appeal across or getting our grievances known to the people who can make that happen. It's really a matter of asking first, why? Right. Why are you doing this? Like, I think starting with why is fundamental. Why do I want to, take to the street and stand in the scorching sun for hours and hours and hours to make my appeal known to the government? Why? What do I want to be? What do I want to be achieved? Right. And even if the government wants to respond or the leader wants to respond, what would they do? So I think it comes with a clear indication or identity of why. Yeah. What is the reason that we are doing this? And like you said, sometimes when we generalize the protest, say, okay, the economy is not doing well, or we've lost confidence in the leader, it seems like a very solid reason, but you open it up for a lot of ways to solve that.
It's vague.
Yeah, it's vague, exactly. But when you come and you say that the Motorway has manholes in them, the government knows exactly what you're talking about, or the leader who wants to solve the problem knows exactly. So sometimes the specificity of the goal is very helpful. Like you knowing exactly, okay, this is the outcome I want the leaders to help me address is very, very important. But again, if you don't know what the goal is, you can't measure it.
And DB, let me just add to what he said about being specific about protest objectives. I think it's very important. Going forward, I personally want to see such customized kind of protest where you don't see end corruption, but you see not to be very, but maybe about the Madam Cecilia Dapa issue. For example. You are saying that, look, we want government to look into this specific issue and not just corruption. We are saying that, look, government, we want you to look into Madam Cecilia Dapa's issue. Right. I think that is more specific enough. So maybe going forward, I think protest leaders should champion such specific, causes in their protests.
I just quickly wanted to just add that, all that we are saying is under the assumption that the leader or the people who can effect the change actually do want to. Right. So what we are saying is that if you tell the person exactly what you want, they are willing and able, or I guess they are able and willing to solve the problem. Because if the person is not willing to solve the problem, you can be as specific as asking for, banku and tilapia from a certain restaurant, and you still wouldn't get it. So there's a fundamental assumption in what we are saying, that the person, in addition to being able to solve your problem, is also willing to do it.
I think that is right.
Kofi, when you mentioned start with why, I wondered if Simon Sinek had just entered. I mean, that's a great book, and that was just by the way. So two things you mentioned. You said something about the efficacy of such protests that we've been having, and if they're able to deliver the needed results. And so we would want to know, I'm sure the audience would also want to know, how did we even get to protest in the first place? Are there options are there other options that could have been explored before protests?
I think it's a very fundamental question, right? I, for once, I'm not a fan of protests. I don't think I have been to any protest. Not that I think it's wrong. I just have not been. So let me just keep it that way. But early on, I was just thinking about this topic, because we're about to have this conversation. And one of the things that came to my mind was, if I have a disagreement or I wanted to make an appeal to my parent, like my mom. Right now, I'm an adult. So let's assume that I wasn't, and then I'm a minor. I have the leadership of a parent over me, and I wanted to make an appeal. I don't think naturally my first course of action would be a protest. I don't think I would, of course, it doesn't seem practical that I would mount a placard in my home, but I don't think that I will be protesting. I think I would rather be seeking to have a conversation. So if you ask me, as I think about how I would bring it into the fundamental source of relationship, which is the family, the nuclear family, or the family sort of relationship, I don't think that if I have an appeal to make to a parent, I don't think I'm going to do it through a protest. I'm going to seek a conversation. So that might be a viable option for us, But even before I go into that, I just want to clarify one thing, that because we are also part of the Grace Life Leadership Center, it's extremely important that we talk about some of the tenets and the, values and things that we, like first and foremost, we in TGLC, we define leadership, not like, positional leadership. We think leadership is a culture. Yes. We think that every individual is a leader. Why? It's simple, because if the minimum requirement of leadership is a follower, then you have yourself to lead. So you already have a follower, right? And so at Grace Life, when we talk about making an appeal to a leader, essentially, it would not necessarily be the government or a political power, or even a religious leader or whatever it is. It would just, because the way we describe when we talk about leadership, it kind of puts the limelight on you, the individual, for you to see yourself as a leader. And what that does for us as a people is that it places the responsibility of action fairly and squarely on us. Okay, so that's one way that we would have defined a leader. The other thing also, in terms of why we do demonstrations or we do protests, is that it also assumes that the problem we are talking about is supposed to be fixed by that government, right? But I don't think that in Grace Life we don't believe that all the problems are supposed to be fixed by a government or by a particular. I think we believe that we have a shared responsibility in fixing the problems that we face as a continent or as a society. We believe that we have that shared responsibility, and so first and foremost, the problem we are protecting about, whose responsibility is it? Right. So yes, there are some clear responsibilities: economic structure, putting the country in a state where it is open for business, that kind of stuff. But for example, if we were protecting about the footbridge at Medina, if it's been made and people are not using it, we have to change our attitude and use the footbridge. The government needs not be protested against for that purpose. So I thought I would just make that quick, addition into that. Now, having said that, I've even forgotten the question you asked.
I think options. If there are other options to explore before protest.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think the first one would be a dialogue. Let's have a dialogue. Let's sit down and talk like a family would do. If you have anything. The other thing I can think about, maybe before we even get to protest, would probably just like, again, I think that's what led me to going into the route. What can you do? Right. We know that we would want the government to do something. Yes, 100%. We have the right to demand accountability. So this is not a suggestion that we should not hold our governments accountable, but it is also an indication that we cannot assume or say that everything gets supposed to be done by the government. So the other second route I would say, and I will ask every Ghanaian, anybody listening, is that ask yourself, what can you also do right now that does not involve a protest? And if you can fix something to a certain extent, as far as you, the individual, you've done your responsibility. I think there might be other ones. I don't know if you have any more ideas, Sly, on what we can do before we get to protest.
Yeah, definitely. I think we all have a responsibility. I want to start on the tangent of responsibility, right? Yeah. Before you go to the street to protest, you need to ask yourself, what am I protesting about? What could I have done about that situation? So for instance, if let's say that people died out of a flooding situation because the rains are coming, and we all know what might cause, of course, New York also floods and all of that. But here in our part of the world, I think it's just out of sheer negligence and all of that. So we have all come to a consensus. We have all agreed that mostly our gutters are choked. Yeah. So before, let's say, you go to the streets to protest about flooding that killed people, you need to ask yourself, what is the cause of flooding? Yeah. All right. Number one, probably we don't have enough bigger gutters, which is probably the part of the government to do. Number two, we've all agreed that it's because of choked gutters. What causes choked gutters? It is because of dumping of refuse indiscriminately and all of that. So I wouldn't advise a citizen to go out and protest against such, a situation.
Something they can,
something
they
can do. They should take a reflective view of the situation and know, look, I think I have a role to play in this. However, things like the food bridge, right?
Yeah.
Whose responsibility is it? I think to a large extent, even though that is not what is happening in other countries, private people can just come together, construct a road and toll it and take the money, public-private partnership. But here, I think that the government has the responsibility to construct such food bridges. Yeah. So I think that people should go on protest, but before that, they should analyze what they're protesting about, and come to terms with themselves, whether or not they have a responsibility to play in the way things are going. In fact, even including corruption. Yeah. When we talk about corruption, these are not perpetrated by robots. Mm-hmm. It's human beings that perpetrate corruption, right? Mm-hmm. So before you go to the street and protest about corruption, ask yourself, in which way have I been corrupt, in my own dealings with others? Yeah. Mm-hmm. If you find yourself guilty, you have no moral right to go to the street and protest against corruption. Right. Of course, that is on a larger scale where people take millions of money. Yeah. But I think essentially it is important for individuals to have a retrospective view of what role they have to play in solving situations in a country, and that is not to say people shouldn't go out to protest. I mean, I think personally, I might go out there if the issue is that grave. And
I actually might. I just haven't done it in the past.
Yes. I think I will take a leap of faith one day and do that. But I believe that we have a responsibility. We all have a responsibility to help the government, but that doesn't take away the fact that our governments haven't been fair to the citizens over the years, and so we are likely to see more of these protests because majority of the problems we are talking about could actually be solved by the government. Yeah.
All right. It has been a very great discussion looking at some of the things to do before you eventually embark on a protest. So I would want to know if an individual or a group of people have checked all those boxes and then eventually decide to go on a protest. If they carry out this protest and it doesn't yield the results they want to see, what do they do then?
That's an interesting one, right? Yeah. What do you do after a protest and you don't see the results?
You don't see the results.
So the other thing I want to say is that, you see, we need to also be measured in the things we fight for in the protests. Okay. Right? Yeah. So that you don't go fighting for the government to build 111 hospitals in 4 years. Mm-hmm. That is the subject of the protest, which that for me, and these are just political sloganism or whatever they call it. A government in our part of the world cannot build 111 hospitals in 4 years or 8 years. Mm-hmm. So if you are going to protest for such a cause, I think you have been over ambitious. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. So that is why I'm saying that we need to be measured in the things we fight for in the protest so that we can actually measure them. Yeah. So that if you fight for 200 hospitals to be built, or we are fighting for dualization of the Accra-Kumasi road in 4 years, you can't measure these results because, it's not rocket science. That can't be achieved before the government leaves office. Yeah. Right. So again, we need to protest for things that we believe the government could address quickly so that we can measure them. And when that is not done, so if you're not able to measure results, it simply means that probably you didn't target the right kind of protest channels or even what you're protesting for. Mm-hmm. But I think that what do you do after you protest and you don't see results? Mm-hmm. First of all, like back to my point, first of all, you have to think about why didn't you get results? Yeah. Mm-hmm. After the why, you know what to do. So let's say, if it is because we're overambitious, then clearly you can't do anything about it. Mm-hmm. You just have to measure it the next time. Mm-hmm. If it is using the wrong channels or using the wrong people, you definitely have to relook at it. Yeah. Is it possible to involve members of parliament in the demonstrations or the protests that we go out there? Yeah. You can look at it. Does it mean, would you have to do more hashtags? Yeah. Would you want to get more people to cry out loud on the internet? Right. Maybe you want to look at that, right? But fundamentally, I think that people should just be measured. We should know what we are fighting for so that we can measure it. Otherwise, we will think we don't have results. But
it's like that's an interesting one. So talking about checking if maybe your requests were over ambitious or stuff like that, could another thing they have to do is another protest? Maybe the first one didn't work out well, so go back to the board and clarify the protest, because it looks like for some of the protests that have been held, if the first one doesn't go as planned, you go back to the table, draw an even stronger one, and then come back with another protest.
I think repeated protests have proven sometimes fruitful to get. So a typical example, I stay around Kaswa, and there is this small place between the toll booth and getting to, I've forgotten the name of the place, that I learned has been there. Whenever it rains, the silt, is it the silt or the water draws the sand onto the ground, onto the road, and so it makes it difficult for the cars to pass. And remember, this is a very busy road. That is the main road between Accra, Takoradi, Cape Coast. And I learned that particular issue has been there for almost 20 years. And I asked myself, is there leadership? Who is supposed to do this, right? So recently, I realized that there was a protest. You know, the people of Kaswa are saying that they are suffering and all of that. So I realized that they started doing something, and I think it is because of the repeated protest or discussion that have been ongoing due to that particular problem. So repeated protests have their way of maybe drawing attention. I believe in repetition. When you do something repeatedly, even your father, if you keep calling their names, they'll just become fed up, right? But having said that, I think it's important to also say that if your protest, or the reason for protest is ambitious, like I said, it doesn't matter how many times you protest. You might not get a result, right? It's just like trying to squeeze water out of rock. That kind of protest. I think if you do it billion times, you didn't find results.
So what if you find yourself in a situation where this overambition, in quotes, is coming from a promise? Maybe the government has already made a promise and are not fulfilling it, so then you go back to hit them with this. Yeah,
so it's either the government wasn't wasn't very honest with their responses, because you are just protesting, so they feel like giving you something sweet to your ears. They tell you that, look, we'll do it. But if they say they will do it, for me, it's not about the promise. It's about assessing the feasibility of the promise. So that if you protest 10 times about a problem and the government says I'll solve it, you need to come back and ask yourself, is this true? Like, can they solve it? Are they just saying it so that I go back and sit down, or they're saying it because they can do it? So then there's a need for continuous reassessment and analysis of problems that we fight for, because I can tell you for a fact that the protests that have happened in Ghana from how many years, 20 years back, if you go to the street today, people will still be talking about the same problem. Why? Because there is something fundamentally wrong. If you want the government to solve the issue of the dollar being higher than exchange rate. This exchange rate situation has been there for God knows how many years. And I've actually analyzed this. It's not, one government cannot solve this problem. So if you protest against one government to solve the issue of higher exchange rates, I can tell you that they can't do it. And you have to come back. It's a fundamental issue. Some economists have said that if your imports are higher than your exports. So you need to ask yourself, can the government overturn our exports in 4 years or 8 years? What can they do? Right. So I think, basically that is it. People must analyze what they're protesting against. It can be short term, fine for me. But those overambitious and certain and specific protests, kind of objectives, I think must be looked at. And I'm sure if we do that, we can get results for protests.
Before I get to Kofi, for many of our viewers who may be living outside Ghana, Kaswa is a very wonderful city in the central region. It wants to be a sister of Accra, but usually people do joke around that, if someone lives at Kaswa, then they live very, very far. That was just like this. So Kofi, you live you live outside of Ghana. I'm sure where you are, there has been thousands of protests. I mean, we've seen it in the news, we've heard about it. So tell us, usually when they go and hit the streets and they don't get the desired results, what do they do next?
I guess simple and short, they just go back home and sleep. No, honestly, but I mean, I think of protesting, because at the beginning we established that one of the main reasons why people would be protesting is to make an appeal. And as a Christian, I mean, I think of it also like making prayer, right? Except that as Christians, we make prayer to a perfect Father, but it's not the same when we are making an appeal to a government. However, some of the answers can just be a straight out no. And that's it, and to the point that Sly was making, some of the reasons could be because it was overambitious. Some of them also because they don't actually trust. You see, that's the thing. I feel like sometimes the leaders don't even trust that it's a genuine concern.
Right.
They think of it as a political propaganda.
Yeah.
So they feel that some other political party has just gone to organize some group of people and just
we cannot rule that out.
And so again, this is assuming the best intentions of our leaders, and I'll come to the other side where the best intentions are not, because over the period I don't think we've had a shortage of good examples of people showing that they have a good motive, in delivering to us as governments, right? However, so back to the main point. So sometimes the answer could be a blatant no, and it could be exactly like Sly was saying, just over ambition. Sometimes the people think that we are protesting because we are being it's just a political propaganda that's a political party that's seeking to come to power the following year or two, and then some other times too it can be a prioritization issue, because on the government's agenda or on the leaders' agenda, it's really not top priority for them, which is quite interesting, because assuming that the protest is truly the voice of the people, then the leader has no other business than to make that the top priority. If you have a list of things that you want to do for citizens, and they tell you clearly that I would rather have this as number one, that should be your number one. Exactly. So again, those things have to be true, that the government wants to do the right thing, and then the people are also asking for the right motives, not because they are being instigated by some other political agenda or even their own self-popularity and that kind of stuff, right? But the other reason why you might not get a result is sometimes the government would just say no. And it exists. They would just say no, because again, I think of it as prayer, and it can, you can go and ask God for something in prayer, and He will say no. He is a perfect Father. How much more imperfect leaders? Now, having said that, I know that if you've listened, you might think that this guy is just saying that we should not protest. That's not what I'm saying. Because I mean, I came to Ghana almost about 3 weeks ago, and one of the things, I think, Sly, we were having a conversation. We were in an Uber, I was in a boat, right? We had gone to visit someone, and you asked me that what do I think? Since I got back, because it's been a couple of years since I've been away, and one of the things that I think I mentioned, I still believe, is that there's loss of hope. Right. Hope, because, and I feel that sometimes the reason why we are protesting, or the people protest, and they are rightly so, especially in an era like we find ourselves, not just in Ghana, but even in other countries across the African continent, is just because we are completely fine when you tell us that things are hard, so pay an extra tax. Sometimes the people are unhappy, but in fact, they don't even have a choice, because you buy the food and it's 22% tax sitting on it, VAT plus COVID levy, blah 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 blah. It's all sitting on it. They pay. But in the same vein, you tell us that the economy is hard, but we see somebody siphoning government's money without any repercussions to them. That feels unfair to us. Yes. So we take to the street and we protest against that. So sometimes it's like so I'm not saying that our leaders are all perfect and cannot do harm. What I'm saying is that sometimes we have to bifurcate very clearly what is the government's responsibility and what is our responsibility. I really like the example that you gave. If there's an issue with flooding, the government has a responsibility, but it does not take away our shared responsibility
As
of not
citizens,
littering.
yes.
Let's do our part as well, in addition to putting the government in check. And so that's been evident, again, with a shortage of, or at least they have failed to demonstrate to us that they have our best interests at heart, while all the while asking us to do more. Give more taxes, give us more time, bring us into power. I don't even know why they call it position of power, because in TGLC it's a position of service. Bring us into service 4 more years, 8 more years, whatever more years. And still, when we do that, we listen to you, we pay the taxes, we even pray for you. We pray for you in our homes, right? And then we just cannot seem to catch a break. There's one corruption after the other. We see huge sums of money being spent of something that should not even be on the list of priorities at all to begin with. And some of the basic things we are asking for, we can't seem to get it. And then you keep on asking us to give more tax, give you more years, and wait and wait and wait. It's like we are waiting to see that promise and it's never coming. And that's why people take to the street and they do protest. And so I'm not saying that we should not protest, but I am saying that we should understand that not all the responsibilities should be placed on one person. The government cannot tell us that they have no responsibility, and the opposite is true. We can't also say we don't have a responsibility as citizens. We have to hold both together as true. So while we do our part, let's create the jobs. Let's be honest in our dealings and conversation with one another, but let's also hold the government accountable, because that's the only way our democracy can truly be what it's supposed to be, a democracy.
Very interesting takes. So we've seen a new wave of protests where it started on social media with a lot of noise before they take off to the street. It was the same with the NSAS and the Occupy Jolobito. It took the same trend. And we know that these protests will not end.
Yeah.
In 5 years, we'll hear of some. In 10 years, they would be part of us, because, the democracy system allows it. So then we want to know, how should it be handled going forward on the part of the protest leaders and also on the part of the government?
Okay. I don't know if I...
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to catch a breath right now.
Yeah, so I think, since we all agree that protests will continue to be part of us for a very long time, in fact, it has been part of us, it is part of us, it will continue to be part of us, because you can't, once you accept to have that democratic environment, these are things that you can't control.
Yes.
In other places, you dare not, but here, it will be there. So for me, instead of pushing for it to be abolished by those who are against it, which they wouldn't succeed, because this will continue to be part. The good question, or the important question, is how do we make it better? Which is very important. That I wish we use this entire period talking about how protesters can make protests more effective. But then it will be like we are trying to push people out to the street. That is why we can't take such a way of addressing the situation. So this is perfect, right?
Yes.
But it's good we still have it here. So going forward, how should the protesters go about it? I'll come back to my words. It's the same thing. I think they need to define clearly what they are protesting about.
Okay.
They need to be clear in their minds. They need to be specific. In fact, I'm tempted to say that we must have smart protest kind of objectives, where we are talking about specific, measurable, achievable, and time bound, kind of that, right? In fact, to the extent that you could give the government an ultimatum that, look, haven't looked at the feasibility of you solving the problem. We're giving you 1 month to come up with. So it has to be feasible. For instance, you can say that we want you to, as a matter of urgency, come up with a communique that addresses, sorry I'm using Madam Cecilia Adapai's issue, but it looks like that is the newest corruption scandal in town.
On your mind.
Or on my mind, right? You could say that, look, we want you to come up with a communique addressing the issue in the next 1 month. I don't think this is difficult for any government to pick the microphones, take the camera and come and do. This is a specific, measurable, attainable kind of protest objective. And the government should do that. If they fail to do that, many people will know that indeed they're just trying to ignore your grievance, right? So again, I think protest leaders must be very specific, and measurable. And I think if they're able to do that, I believe that they can be more successful in their in their protest objectives and all of that. And I will hope that also the authorities will give more way for people to protest, of course, responsibly.
Yeah.
Right? They should do that responsibly. I think the Occupy Jolobi one wasn't that bad. I think they handled the situation the second day especially, but the first day was a bit brutal.
Yes.
So going forward, I hope that the police service and whoever is supposed to guide these people, because they will continue to push for this protest to happen. So on the part of the protesters, they should be very smart in their protest. And on part of the authorities, I think since it is a democratic kind of arrangement, they should guide it. They should make sure that they allow people. Otherwise, we might see what we don't want to see. So I'm not endorsing protest. I'm just saying that we must all show responsibility in what we do. Yeah. So going forward, I think that is the way to go about it.
Okay.
Yeah, I still stand by that.
All right, Kofi.
So two stakeholders, right? The people who are protesting, and then
the authorities.
Yes, right. The leaders who are supposed to respond. So let me start from the leaders. I think that, fundamentally, if your responsibility is to lead, then your job is to serve, right? That's what it is. If your responsibility is to lead the people, is to serve. I think I have a hypothesis that probably our leaders, again, talking about the efficacy of protest, because what used to work very well 60 years ago, it's difficult to say the same in the current, regime, or, in the most like 20 years ago, right? Or for the past 20 years, it's difficult to say that it works very, very well. At least not to the extent that it used to work. So I guess the question to me is why? Again, and my hypothesis is that to our leaders, it looks as though they assume, or they don't think, again, assuming that the leaders actually want to help and want to do the right thing, they don't think that it is a true voice of the people.
Right.
That's the thing. That's what I think. Again, there's a fundamental assumption that the leaders do want to help, because sometimes they think that it is a political propaganda, or they think that, you people should see all that I'm doing for you. So like the government would say, I'm doing A, B, C, D. Why are you protesting about X, Y, Z? But what it means, if it is the voice of the people, it's not a planned propaganda or whatever, then it means that your A, B, C, D is a misplaced priority. Your priority should be X, Y, Z. Right. So what I would say to our leaders is that if your job is to lead, then your responsibility is to serve, or other way around. Then if you're serving, what is the service? What are you doing? What you're supposed to do is to give the people what they want. And so let's start viewing the protest as a legitimate channel that people use to voice their grievances. It is not always, although sometimes it could be, it is not always a political propaganda. It is not always, some group of individuals seeking to gain popularity. It is possible, but sometimes it can be the genuine concern of the citizen. And every leader, or if you are, your work is to serve the customers, serve the people who you have been put in place or in charge of to serve. And if they are saying a word, you better pay attention and, produce a keen ear to them. Right? That's what I would say. So let's not write every protest as our leaders, even for us, even like here at TGLC, when let's say the volunteers are saying that, hey, the work is too much. Right. Or let's not think that, these guys are lazy, they don't do the work, or these guys are not passionate about the mission. No, it could be a genuine concern. So although it could also be that people are being lazy, people are not passionate anymore, people want more salary, it can also be that it's true. And if we assume the best intentions of people, or if we think that what they are saying is true, then we have to heed and pay attention and give them a listening ear. At least, like we were saying, tell them why we can't do it, or why we can't do it now. But to think that it is completely wrong, or they are just making noise and they will stop after a week or whatever, it's a complete disregard of the people's inner voice and want. And nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be ignored. We all want to be heard. So let our government and our leaders hear us. That's what I would say. Yeah. So, okay, cool. I was going to say one more. On the side of the protesters, I'll say this. If you do something that doesn't seem to deliver the results that you want, you have to check it. You have to check it. So in addition to protesting, I don't have any ideas in my mind, but there are people who are more adept, or whatever the word is, in matters of social discourse and how to bring about change. I know, let's find out what else can we do, right? What more effective way can we employ, or what can we add to our protest to make it effective? Why was it that 60 years ago protest was effective? Because I read a story about Dr. Martin Luther King when he mentioned that people went there, supposed to go there and just push for inclusion of black people, their freedom. Even white people went there. Why? Because it worked. They believed in whatever they said. Some way, somehow it worked. That's now how come we see the better inclusion of black people in the Americas and all these places. And so if it worked so well in those days, something must be wrong with what we are doing or how we are doing it. It's not the same. It's not giving us the results that it used to give. So for me, what I would say is that when we are protesting, let's find out, can we add something to it? Can we do it in a different way, like I was saying, in a better way? Or can we do something else that will get us a result? The goal is not to protest. The goal is to get your voices heard. And sometimes protesting might do the job, sometimes it might not. Either ways, let's focus on the result, not just the actions we are taking. What will give us a result, not just effort. Just effort is nothing. Result is what we are looking for.
Indeed. Sylvester?
Yeah.
Any final words?
Final
from the
words.
two
So
of
I
you?
would say that finally, right, I would call on people who have the urge to protest to also look at other ways they could channel the energy to solving issues that they might be protesting about, if they have the ability to do that.
100%.
So, for instance, young people who find a problem with leadership in Africa have decided that, look, we can't continue to complain. We want to do something about it. And that is why the Grace Life Leadership Center's vision is amazing.
Yes.
Young people who are saying that, look, instead of complaining about so many issues, we want to actually channel that energy to help to change the narrative in the next 10 to 20 years. So I hope that there will be more of such initiatives out there. If we are talking about a road issue, is it possible that young people will set up companies that can actually construct roads, approach the government and say, look, 10 years ago, we used to complain. Here we are with money. Please, we need partnership with you to construct the Ebri whatever road, 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers. So while we are protesting, I hope that young people with the capacity, with the knowledge, with the resources should, have a reflection and think about what they can do. Something that they believe that even if the government doesn't respond, they can still do, like we are doing right now. It's a leadership problem. We saw that problem and we want to do something about it. That is why we have TGLC. And I believe that with this particular vision, we might have less of protest, because once leaders, and that is an assumption, right? Once leaders begin to do the right thing, we might probably see less of protest. That is not a guarantee, because sometimes you are not able to tell whether these protests are genuine or just propaganda. But I think, we've increasingly come to agree that even the coups that we see around Africa, they take over and they say that we are taking over because things are not right in the country. Who is responsible for making the things right? To a large extent, it is the leaders. So I hope that in the near future, because through TGLC and other stakeholders, we are going to help solve this leadership problem, there will be less of protests across Africa.
100%.
I hope so.
Kofi.
Final words. My final words will not even be about the topic, actually. But I do like what Sly just talked about. I think it's something that resonates with me as well. My final words is that for most of us who will be listening, a lot of us will be young people. We were made to thrive.
Yes.
We were made to thrive. Sometimes it pains me very, 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 very much when, sometimes like in the West, or sometimes, you see any nonprofit trying to raise money and it's a picture of a black child, shirtless, without food, looks started. It's like a symbol of poverty. But we are not supposed to be that. It cannot be done by one person, but together we are a force to be reckoned with. So while we are talking about leadership uprising and protest, my final words is it's not about protest at all, but it's really about leadership. That if we can lead us, if we can lead ourselves, if we can ask ourselves, what can I do here right now in my small corner today that will bring a change? It might not be a change of 30 million people or 1 billion people. It might be a change of one single individual, but that is your world. A lot of people set out to change the world, and sometimes we think that not everybody actually gets to change the world, but I think actually most people get to change the world. It's not really about whether you get to change the world, it's the definition of what the world is to you. For some people, the world is all 8 billion of us. But for a lot of us, it will not be the 8 billion of us. It would be your family, your spouse. It will be your neighbor. It would be your ability to create a solution in that small village where you are that allows for small kids who don't even know what a computer is. They learn it on the screen. You can go to the school once a week and show them your laptop. Now they know a laptop. They don't have to envision it on a board drawn with a chalk. They have a laptop in front of them. That's progress. That's solution. And so you are changing the world. It's not 7 billion or maybe 20 kids in class 2. That's the world you're changing. So we are made to thrive, and let's make it count.
We will indeed make it count a lot. So I think I was wrong to think this could be done in 30 minutes.
How long is it?
It has been a very long conversation and an interesting one. I could say we can go on and even take days and we wouldn't have exhausted it. But then I think the most important thing is to let the essential points go out there. In case anybody is thinking about organizing the next protest, try to consider these steps that have been given by Kofi and then Sylvester. So thank you so much for coming again.
Thank you.
And this has been this has been the Africa Leadership Conversation, where we've been looking at leadership uprising, the protests, the drivers, and the outcomes. Do all to subscribe to our YouTube channel and then stay with us for the next episode. Bye.